check it, homie, check it. Do you expect me to vote for the lesser of two evils? Never. It's more like the evil of two lessers. That's like saying choose your oppressor. Pick one, Jeffrey Dahmer or Hannibal Lecter. You want crack, coke, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper. They're all fucked up, but neither one of them better. Cause crack is like a Democrat, and cocaine Republican, marijuana independent party, same government. You really think your vote count? Ask my folk down in Florida, didn't they straight throw they shit out, and the crackers act innocent.
That was a freestyle from M1 of Dead Prez, the duo that brought us this revolutionary, legendary album, Let's Be Free, that ignited in me that revolutionary but gangster flame. Back in the 90s in varsity, Politrikkks is the biggest distraction created by the European power structure for African people. And we know that there is no group in the world that is more obsessed by Politrikkks than black people. They'll tell you, yes, Politrikkks control our lives. However true that may be, the extent and the energy that black people exert towards politics is way overrated. It really boils down to gossip and escapism. Escapism because scholarship calls us all to self-responsibility, to take action to change ourselves, while politicking focuses on blaming certain individuals, pointing fingers at politicians. And the savior syndrome that causes black people to look for saviors outside of themselves, when the greatest reparation that Africans need is psychological. Hence, I always emphasize the importance of a spiritual revolution, a cultural revolution, because African spirituality or African cosmology teaches us that the kingdom of heaven is within us and salvation comes from within. Let's look at some of the negative impacts of politicking. A brother with a kindred spirit replied to one of my tweets talking about how, as African people, we have largely focused on European imperialism and have forgotten about Arab imperialism. And actually, we pretend like Arabs are our comrades and brothers in arms, when in actual fact, they initiated Europeans in this whole enslavement of African people. If you're South African, you know the K word. You probably don't know it does not exist in the English or the Dutch language. It actually is an Arabic word. Ask yourself why. That is because Arabs were here first. They called us that word, and Europeans heard them call us that and adopted it. Another brother with a kindred spirit tagged me when he quoted a tweet where there was a discussion about South Africa's indigenous name, and someone responded about it being Azania. And so he says, I don't understand why so-called revolutionaries can love a Greek name rooted in the Arab slave trade so much, brother. So in this so-called conscious community, you will find two groups of people from two schools of thought. Very, very few of us come from the scholarship school of thought. In this picture, you have the giants. You've got Dr. Ivan van Zedma, you've got Dr. Joseph Ben Yochanan, Dr. Hendrik Clark, and company. While most of the people come from this school of thought of distraction, from politicians who are products of the European and Arab power structures. Hence the whole concept of the savior syndrome. Looking for solutions in foreign concepts like Marxism, which has failed basically everywhere. And so the dangers of politricking that produces the other group that it comes from the school of thought of Politrikkks will be the example of this gentleman over here who said that the fate of Africa depends on Nigeria and the fate of Nigeria depends on good leaders. Good leaders can only come out of a system of strong and capable followers holding to account those they elect to govern them. It depends on you. The problem with that statement is that people from that school of thought do not learn from history because they don't know history. Africa has had great leaders, and we all know what happened to them. And so history and the actions of our ancestors are there for us, for our examples. And so the solution for Africa will not come from politricks. Politricks are a distraction and a diversion. The revolutionary movement was started by scholarship which predates all political movements in Africa. And Politrikkks came in and hijacked the movement. Did you know the concept Pan-Africanism actually was invented by African scholars in the diaspora? The term Africa for Africans was actually coined by an African-American abolitionist, journalist, physician, a Freemason, by the way, Martin Robertson Delaney, in the 1800s, long before there was any political movement in Africa. This is the very reason why everybody's confused about Pan-Africanism, because it was hijacked by politicians. Most people, who by the way come from the school of thought of politicians, politricking, when they think of Pan-Africanism, they think one government in Africa, one currency, and all of that don't make no sense, because a currency has never united anybody, and neither has a government. This is why it's important that we need to raise up a generation that goes back into scholarship, because scholarship involves analytical thinking, it involves testing of hypotheses and abandoning failed hypotheses. Instead of participating in the circus of who should be president and who should be removed, as if any of that is going to make a difference in the lives of African people, when we know very well that the political system in Africa belongs to the white power structure, and therefore it serves the white power structure. Ask yourself, all political parties need donations in terms of monetary substance. Guess where all the funding comes from? It comes from white power structures. And we know there are no free lunches, so your black politicians, at the end of the day, they serve those who have funded them. Kickbacks. That is why I have zero political affiliation. The last example of how politricking distracts African people is the concept of land. Now, God forbid that there be a simpleton who's going to claim that I said that land is not important. Land is very, very important for many things. If we're going to grow our own food and things like that. Imagine going to the river to Patla and the owner of the land comes and says, you can't do that here. So land is important. So where black politicians distract all of you in the subject of land is when they compare land to white monopoly capital. Because the reality is farmers do not even control the food industry. The retailer dictates to both the farmer and the consumer, because actual power lies in distribution and not in production. So if you're going to talk about the Stellenbosch Mafia, you're not talking about any farmers. You're talking about people that control the banking system, they own the retirement annuity companies. These are the people that control the distribution. And politicians are not talking about that. They're talking about land. As if becoming farmers will automatically get us to control the food industry, but it won't. And all of that is putting the cart before the horse. Because what is essentially needed, the first groundwork should be done in the area of scholarship, the area of psychology. Everything else becomes useless when you have dealt with the psychology, and that can only be achieved through African spiritual systems. That can only be done through scholarship. I could give multiple examples on how politricking actually serves African people no good, but instead it delays our progress. It creates a circus where African people gang up against each other through factionalism, and people actually lose their lives in the whole process. So the ancestral message from me, Musoni, today is: let us get away from politricking. Spend 5 minutes of your day looking at politics so you know what's happening. But do not use it as an escapism, as a form of feeling informed and trying to replace true knowledge. Because trust me, the Stellenbosch Mafia are not grooming their children to be discussing politricks, because all of that is below them, and they spend their time doing important things, and tomorrow they will still run the economy. And as I said before, the most dominant groups in the world are people that have a very strong cultural center, be it the Jews or whoever. And the opposite is true. The most dominated people are the ones that are the most furthest from their cultural center. Thanks for watching. That's it from me, Musoni. Mtogulu wabangoni ni bandao. Absheni bokokwana.